Welcome to Lawyers Who Learn, where we explore how attorneys' engagement and lifelong learning fuels their growth. Join us to uncover these journeys and gain insights for your legal career.
Shaun, I'm super pumped to talk about the value-based pricing, the end of the billable hour, all things in between. So thank you for being on today.
Thank you very much for the invitation. Delighted to be here.
Absolutely. So as I was telling you, we'll get into it a little bit more this morning. Well, let's just start with what I love so far, the name of your company, because I think it tells the story really well. And your AI chatbot, Declan, told me what it was about, but and I see you're wearing even yellow now. So tell us, why are you called the Big Yellow Penguin?
Okay, right. Well, I originally, as lawyers do when you cease operating private practice, you set up a consultancy called named after your name, Shaun Jardine Consulting, and that's what I set up. And then when the certificate came through from the company registration authorities, I looked at it and thought, this is so boring, I'm going to have to slash my wrists and then create something new. And I decided on Big Yellow Penguin because I'm a great fan of John Kotter of the Harvard Business School. He wrote a fable called Our Iceberg is Melting, which is about a little group of penguins that if they don't find a new iceberg, they're all going to die. And in 2014, I bought myself a penguin costume, put it on and spoke at three law conferences, one in America, one in Birmingham in England, and one in London in England. And I was waving a copy of John Kotter's book to say to the legal profession, look, our iceberg is melting. We've got to change the way we do things. I happen to be 6'4" tall, so I'm quite large. And yellow penguins do exist, but they're quite rare. And so I thought that this would be a perfect name for my company. The penguin is a metaphor for change. And let's face it, everybody loves a penguin. So that seems to have worked for me quite well.
It's amazing. And we'll get into your AI chatbot as we start talking, but even the personality of the penguin is there. And so I just want to sort of refresh with you and those who are listening. And I'll tell you what I think about what you should think about who's listening is what this podcast is about. And it's called Lawyers Who Learn. And fundamentally, as you know, lawyers have to continue learning throughout their career. And now more than ever, it's more important for attorneys to learn and prepare for the future of law. And the future of law, as you see it, is value-based pricing, no longer with the billable hour. And so what we're going to talk about, and what I like to think about, and it's very relevant to the lawyer or the law firm, just one who would be listening to this and actually wants to implement value-based pricing. And that's who we're going to be talking to versus like thousands of people, just one. And like that, if we can get one attorney or law firm to implement value-based pricing from this, I think we've done our job because it's one at a time. And so I think the best way to go about this, and you've written a book, and I see it's right behind you, Ditch the Billable Hour, and you consult on this. And instead of getting into you have a really great, I think it's an 8-part philosophy or plan on how to do that. Instead of going that direction, I want to actually go backwards. And I want to talk about what you had to learn when you were running your firm. If you can tell to go through that. And like I said to you earlier, I already interviewed you through your AI chatbot. So we're going to kind of go through that interview and see how your chatbot goes to where you are. So the first question I want to ask you is, if you could share what your firm was, and how big it was, and just tell us about the moment where I assume you were doing billable hours, where what did you have to learn? What was the pain that you went through that you said, okay, because we all go through pain, we all hate the billable hour, but what did you have to do to actually make that happen, to turn it into something?
Okay, it all happened in about 2012, and
Okay.
I had I used to have a regular meeting with a law firm marketer who worked for a big law firm, and the deal was we'd meet up once a quarter, and whoever got the most out of the meeting would buy lunch. And one day I had this meeting with this guy, a guy called Simon White, and he said, Shaun, you've got to read this book. You've got to read this book. It's absolutely brilliant. And it was a book by a Canadian lawyer called Mitch Kalowski, and it was called Reimagining Legal Services in the 21st Century. And it was a pithy novel. It was in 2012 it came out, a pithy novel about what the law firm of the future would look like if lawyers embraced technology and learned how to use it. Now, Mitch was running his own business. He's since gone on to lecture at the University of Calgary and on tech and law firms, and he's traveled the world consulting. And he came over to the UK. I met him and we arranged the conference, and I got the conference sponsored. And I said to Mitch, I'm not going to give you any money. I said, but what I am going to do is give everybody who turns up a copy of your book. And we had this event where we had people out in Coventry and people were coming up from London to hear Mitch speak. In Mitch's book, he made the first reference to a firm, a US firm, that were doing value-based pricing. And I'd never heard about it. I thought, what is this? I must find out. I started reading about it. Then I started contacting and linking in with lawyers that were doing this, including some in Australia. And then eventually these people were telling me, look, Shaun, you've got to come out in 2017. There's an event happening in Dallas, Texas. It's going to be an event organized by a pricing guru, an American guy called Ron Baker. And you ought to come to this. It'd be very interesting. So I thought, well, okay, I will go to the event. 100 professionals there, lawyers and accountants. I was the only Brit. And there were lawyers from all over Australia, New Zealand, Canada. And I just thought, wow, some of these people were doing it. Some of the people were learning about it. And I just thought, I've got to get in touch with everybody. I've got to keep in touch with everybody. And then I am going to ask some questions for the next few years. How do you do this? Why do you do this? What do you overcome? How do you overcome the no-no penguins? The penguin will go, oh, no, no, no. That'll never work here. My area of law is special. How do we overcome that? And that's what I did. And so for a number of years, I kept in touch with people. And then eventually I had to bite the bullet and then say, oh, we need to roll this out and have a go at it with my firm. And that's what I did with the pilot group. I then turned 60 at my firm and thought, I've done quite a lot of time in private practice now. I'd quite like to do something else. And so I then turned onto the dark side of law firm consulting.
We'll get there. We'll get there.
And then got into that.
So let's tell me the score here, because I'm going to give you 1-0 to Shaun versus Declan, because and we're gonna share right now what Declan is. But Declan essentially just told me, and maybe this is true or not, after a month-long grueling session, back to back. You were with timesheets, and you were burnt out, and everything was just kind of hit you, is when you realized you needed something. I'm sure that kind of happened as well, but it didn't get into that detail, or maybe not.
No, I certainly wasn't burnt out, but I was a litigation lawyer. I was pretty good at time recording. You know, I
added burnt out. It didn't say that.
Oh, okay.
But it didn't tell me that story about the book and going to the conference. And I assume, I think what you did is brilliant, because I've published a book and I've played around. So I published a book, and also with Lawline, just so you know, we've taken our 2,000 courses and we've created a learning AI chatbot as well. And so with all the courses, and if you go into any course, you can ask it any question about the course. It'll give you the answer from the course, and it will link it back to the point in the video where it gets it from. And so it's super helpful. It's been great. And I assume, Declan, the AI chatbot comes from your 700-page book and maybe other resources. Is that correct?
It is. The book's 100,000 words. And within the book, it's got QR code links to articles written by Ron Baker, Tim Williams, who's in the advertising space, lots of other lawyers, and podcasts. And so what we were able to do was direct the chatbot to say, look, you're not completely in a walled garden, but you've got resources available to you, and we want you to try and focus on these resources and these people. So I had one friend of mine was trying it out, and he was trying to find out the ferry times from Southampton to the Isle of Wight. And
Yeah.
Declan didn't know that, but
Yes.
fair enough.
But I got to tell you, I don't know when are you launching? When are you launching it? Just curiosity.
Well, I hope to be able to launch it in about 2 weeks' time. That's
okay.
my plan.
So by the time this airs, it will be launched and will be free for everybody to kind of mess around with it.
It's everybody can have a trial of it to mess around with it,
Okay.
and then if firms think that this adds value to what they're trying to do, then I'm happy to
figure something out.
putting together a deal for them.
Yeah, no, I think it was really well done, and also, like I said, the personality. I could see the future of sort of this turning books into live sort of chats and getting there. So let's go to the next part. So you went to this thing. You said, okay, I need to do this. One of the things that you realized, according to Declan, is the biggest issue was a new skills. What was the new skill set that you needed to get firms to actually do this?
Well, the biggest hurdle to overcome is we've got to change the way we work, and we've got to change the way that we've always worked. We've got to start having conversations with clients and finding out what they want to achieve by working with us. Because quite often when you say to a group of lawyers, what is it you sell? They'll tell you, we sell our time and expertise. Well, that's not what clients are buying. Clients are buying outcomes. They've got a problem. I want a solution to my problem. If I'm seeing a family lawyer or a matrimonial lawyer, I might be in a relationship that makes me very unhappy. I want to be happy. That's what I'm buying. I'm not necessarily invested in the forms and the paperwork that it takes to get me divorced. I just want that outcome.
And again, 100%. And what Declan said also is it's a whole nother philosophy of change management.
Yeah.
And and I think that's the book that you were talking about the iceberg.
Yeah.
What does that mean, change management? Like, what did you have to take us through that a little bit? Because okay. I think it's a behavior change, but how do you go through that?
It is. You've got to accept it. It is a project. Implementing value-based pricing is not an email coming out from the CEO to say, tomorrow we're going to do a new way of billing. It's not that. It's got to be, you look at the 8 steps to change. And in my book, I actually point off all I've done is copy John Kotter's 8 stages. Harvard Business School, it is well tried and established, so that any lawyer that looks at it says, oh, are you sure, Shaun? I can say, yeah, here's John Kotter, Harvard Business School. This is an accepted methodology. But the first, and I call it the 8P point plan. First P is paradigm. What is the reason that for making this paradigm shift? Now, at the moment, one of the drivers is being Gen AI. If it's doing law quicker, why should we change our business model? Well, you should, because what took you 6 hours now takes you 6 minutes. How are you going to charge for it? Because you don't want to do it on time. So that's our paradigm shift. Then it is, second P is pioneers. Let's get together a group of pioneer penguins that are prepared to look at this project and do a test case in an organization. Because lawyers being lawyers, you're not going to go big bang. Someone's going to want to make sure that we know what we're doing and that we've tested it and proved the concept. We then, third P, we've got to plan it. How are we going to put together this plan, and where are we going? What's our vision? We've then got to promote it with communication across the board, because communication is really, really important. We've then got the 5th P is permit. We've got to permit people in our legal firms to challenge the way we've been doing things for decades, and be prepared and permit them to try things and possibly fail. And lawyers aren't good when it comes to failing sometimes. So we've got to create that opportunity. We've got to create a psychologically safe space for them to do it. We've then got to create short-term wins and celebrate those. P6 is prizes. Then we've got to persevere. We've got to keep our pedal to the metal, because change in any organization takes time. And then we've got to go for that cultural change, which is P8, the passion. And if we can do all of that over a period of months, and sometimes change management projects can take years, but it is that kind of idea where we start off at P for the paradigm shift and work through clearly delineated stages.
So 2 things. One, I hope you have a cheat sheet somewhere where you haven't memorized that, because that was impressive. Two is I really appreciate that what you're saying, look, this isn't a new idea. We're taking something from Harvard, from change management, and we're just adapting it so it's more relatable. And I did it. So it's not like it's not in theory. So I really appreciate that. So now we're going to talk about some specific things that you learned, and we'll kind of go through quickly because there's a lot that you learned through that. Two things, and I keep looking down because I have a lot of good information from Declan, so I apologize. But one is when you talk to customers, and what was the number one thing that they would tell you when you said you're going to do this, or what? Or I guess on both sides, what did they tell you? Yeah, I guess you.
Well, for lawyers, one of the things if we're having these conversations with clients about what they want to achieve isn't something that we normally do. If a good question to ask a client at the outset of a matter is, look, let's take money off the table. Let's take costs off the table. How would you like to work with us? Because quite often we work with clients the way we've always worked with clients, so we expect them to fit in with us. And actually, it might be the kind of client that says, I'd like you just to pick up the phone, not send me huge documents. I want you to talk me through this kind of stuff. Well, let's start talking to people about how they want to interact with lawyers. What does a win look like for you? What does success look like for you in this transaction? And this is where and also, I'm a great fan in giving clients choices. So think of gold, silver, bronze, or something like that, service levels, because people would pay different prices for different things. We do that on an airline ticket every time we jump on a plane. Sometimes we turn left, most times we turn right when we get on the plane. But there are people who are prepared to pay different price points for different services. So I can tell you one client I work with, one law firm and employment law team, the client wanted new employment contracts for the precedents. So we said, okay, we'll give you 3 price points. We will send you some templates, you fill them in, we'll check your homework, £2,000. We will do it for you in 3 weeks' time, £5,000. We will do it for you tomorrow, £8,000. Client chose the £8,000 one. For them, having it tomorrow was strategically very important. They knew that they could get it cheaper. We told them in the same breath they could get it cheaper. But that client wouldn't have known that had we not given them the options. And then you think, was the law firm owner happy? I hope so. Was the client happy? Yes, they were. They're getting their work tomorrow. Was the lawyer happy? Yes, I'm going to do half my chargeable monthly target tomorrow. And it's a win-win.
I love that. And on two sides. One, predictability. They know it's going to cost $8,000 or $5,000 or whatever it is, and it's not going to be a dollar more.
Yeah.
And then on the other side, though, I know there's sometimes the challenge. Maybe not necessarily in an employment contract, but in complex litigation or even less complex, scope creep. Or and I know early on you had some issues where you didn't scope it correctly or you didn't. So take us through some of the scope creep that if I'm an attorney and I do litigation, I'm like, this will never work for us because
litigators will always say, does not apply to me. Okay. And what I encourage these litigators to do is think about dropping a pebble into a pond. Okay. And then we get a load of concentric circles coming out from where that pebble comes in. So if I said to you as a litigation lawyer, David, you're a litigation lawyer, you're an expert litigation lawyer. The center of that concentric circle where we drop the pebble in is yes work. And if I said to you, David, can you draft me a letter before action to go to my neighbor to tell them to fix the fence or the boundary? Can you give me a fixed price for doing that piece of work because you're an expert litigation lawyer? And litigation lawyers will say, yes, I am an expert. I know how to do that letter. Brilliant. So that first circle, we can price. The next circle out is likely. What is likely to happen? Well, I can tell you when you do a letter before action to a neighbor on a boundary dispute, 3 things are going to happen. 1, you're ignored. 2, you get a vitriolic letter or a shouty telephone call from your neighbor. Or 3, you get a vitriolic letter from the neighbor's lawyer. That is likely to happen, one of those three options. So can expert litigation lawyers price the likely work? Yes, they can. Next circle out gets into who knows work. Who knows what's going to happen? But when we get to that third stage, because we've done the first two, because we're experts, can we, for that circle, give a fixed price? And the answer is yes, because by that time we've worked, we know what's happening. And it's that kind of thing where you break it down into chunks. No one's expecting you to cover everything for all time when you have your first meeting. But if I'm an expert in my field, can I give you a price for attending court and arguing a motion or an application for a judge that's going to take 2 hours? We've got 2 hours of the court time tomorrow. Can I give you a price? Yes, I can.
And by the way, that doing it in phases makes a ton of sense. And even billable hour work is done in phases because it's just a change on who is concerned more. When it's the billable hour, I'm like, tell me the phases so I know. And when it's the other way, when it's the lawyer, they want to make sure they do it in phases so they don't go above. And so is there an argument to be said, well, that's putting the onus, and maybe this is how it should be, the risk is now more on the attorney than on the client, because if anything happens, unless you break unless you say, well, it's gone through, maybe there's a asterisk if it goes above this, and then we have to talk again.
Well, yeah, you'll want to scope it. So with litigators, if you're putting a fixed price together for something, you might say, well, this scope is on the basis of you have told me there are going to be 3 witnesses involved in this matter. So I've allowed for proofing 3 witnesses. When we get to it, we find actually there are 23 witnesses we need to prove the case. I'm going to stop. I'm going to say, David, we scoped on the basis of 3. We now know it's 23. I will give you a fixed price for proving the other 20.
How big a behavioral change is that to learn how to scope properly?
Oh, well, you'd love to say it's not a big change at all, but it is. And it is because lawyers are usually too quick to get involved with doing the work. Oh, the new cases come in now, we've got to get on with it. As opposed to sitting back and thinking, what have I got to do? What does the client want? Am I the right fit for the client? And the idea is, if you scope it and tell a client what you're going to do, these are your options. If the client is thinking, well, actually, I can't afford any of those options, let's find out that the client is not the fit at the beginning before we've done the work, as opposed to after we've done the work and we're not getting paid. And that's a new discipline that we have to get into, because quite often when I work with law firms, I survey their staff before I go in anonymously. They're all feedback to me. And in some law firms, they have a culture where the staff feel they've got to take on every bit of work. They are not permitted to turn work away. And management need to know that, because actually not every client is a right fit.
Let me ask you this, because I think there's the elephant in the room. You think of AmLaw 100, you think of the biggest firms. Who do you think will be, or already is, or should be the fastest moving segment to adopt value-based pricing, where others will then have to follow stay competitive?
Well, on the ground at the moment, it is smaller firms that are doing, more agile firms, because they can
make size. When you say small, what do you mean?
It can be, 10, 20 people in an organization. Next week, I start work with a firm that's got 200 people in their organization. So they've got 20 people on a pilot. A friend of mine works in Australia. She tells me that 4 of the big firms there have worked out what they're going to do, but they're all just looking at each other thinking who's going to jump first if they're going to start ditching the billable hour, because that's what's going to happen. One firm will be the first mover, and then other firms will have to follow.
Got it. And that makes sense. And I think at the end, if we'll circle back to that, because I think it's an important thing talking about. You don't want to miss. It's like when big firms started raising their salaries for new associates, everyone followed. let's talk about important metrics, because when you start talking like a business person and not an attorney, when you start thinking about it, thinking of them as a customer and a client, some of the things you start thinking about are NPS scores, client satisfaction scores, things about the outcome versus that. And so how did you implement that? And I'll just give a follow-up just to give you 2 points. I know you also implemented something called a value journal at your firm. So tell us about what that was about and how that helped.
The scores, looking at client satisfaction scores are, let's face it, they're important whatever business you're in, and actually analyzing those. And then most law firms actually only have client satisfaction scoring systems because their regulators say you have to do them. You don't necessarily take that information in and think, what did we learn? And I'm a great fan of after action reviews. What did we learn? So if I quote £10,000 for doing a piece of work, and even if you're still time recording, because some firms will keep time recording, and if it comes in where we time recorded, thought, oh, actually it took us £12,000. Well, what have we learned from that? Because we gave a fixed price from 10,000, we've only charged 10,000. Let's have a look at what went wrong and analyze those. And I'm a great fan of quoting Confucius, who said, being ashamed of our mistakes makes them a crime. And, we're all human. We all make mistakes. Let's try and learn from each other. The other kind of things in terms of value journal, if that's something that Declan dreamt up, that's probably he's putting a spin on something.
The value journal was, Declan said it was, the value journals where lawyers would note down the instances where they felt that they delivered something significant of value to the client. This helped them shift their mindset.
Okay, he's pulled that from somewhere, not necessarily. What you want to do, and what he's alluding to there is, I ask teams to create what I call a BBU, a big book of usefulness, somehow capture this knowledge we create within our teams. So that, for example, there will be people in a law firm who are really good at dealing with objection handling. When someone says, well, that's a bit much, someone in the team will say, well, when that happens, this is what I say. And now what we want to do is capture all of this knowledge and put it in one place, so that when someone new joins our business, we say, this is how we do things around here. These are the objections that we get, and this is how we tend to counter them. And it's capturing all of that, because we're in the business of lawyers of dealing with human capital. Our capital gets in the lift every day, goes home, go down the elevator, gets in their car, drives home. And it's up to them, the human capital, whether they want to come in the following day. And I really, really passionately believe we just need to get all this information, get it into one place, so that we have our big books of usefulness. We have we work out how we do things in our teams, and we adopt best practice. And I did with one of my teams that I worked with on my pilot project was the private client, Wills Trust and Probate. We had 3 offices. And when we looked at how do you work within those offices, what's the customer journey like, it was different in all 3 offices. And the information that was sent out was different. And we looked at it, and when we gathered it all in and looked at it, we thought, actually, that one's better. Why don't we just use the good one? Yeah, let's do that. And it's that kind of thing where we capture all of the value we create and then just keep not reinventing wheels, really.
In a way, it's sort of like the retraining is, it's not about necessarily doing things faster and more efficiently. It's thinking differently. But did you ever implement, because this is sort of the opposite, a bonus-based system to the most efficient attorneys who are adding more value there versus those who bill the longest time? Because it's hard to retrain your behavior if you're not getting incentivized in the same way.
I think what I'm a fan of is incentivizing teams, not individuals, but incentivizing teams. Because if you incentivize individuals only, what happens is they'll start hogging work, especially if you do it on hours billed. You might find that a partner is going to bill loads of hours, but actually lots of that work could have been dealt with further down the food chain, it could have been dealt by a paralegal. It didn't need a partner to do that. But if you're being incentivized on your own billable hours target, that, you know, that doesn't benefit anyone. If you work on a team target, you actually almost turn the pyramid, the charging rate pyramid, on its head, because you want to get the best outcome for the client quicker, because then actually we can then do more work for other clients and do more work and create more value and create it. You know, getting rid of the billable hour removes the artificial cap that we have on our earning potential, because most law firms, when they set budgets, will say, okay, we need a lawyer hours budget for the year. Now, in the UK, it's 1,100 hours. And I realize many American lawyers might think that's a very low budget. But okay, it's 1,100 or 2,400 times the hourly rate equals the target. So we've set a cap on what we can earn. If we just do it on value-based billing, 2,000, 5,000, 8,000, that lawyer generated £8,000 for a piece of work that could have charged 2,000 for, just on the basis that it was time of delivery was important to the client.
No, and it's interesting because you're saying 2,000, 4,000, 8,000, but of course, in companies and even small businesses, you're really dealing with bills 20,000, 50,000, 70,000, depending on the litigation. And so that's where I think the challenge becomes. And I'm curious, you know, it's easy. A $900 an hour, it adds up pretty quickly when you're dealing, you know, with some sort of bogus lawsuit against you. But you need a lawyer to go through that. To me, that's where, like, I guess the second elephant in the room might be is like, it might be hard to say, okay, if you want to file a motion to dismiss, for example, the flat rate is 25 grand. Is that, you know, versus like, it could be less, it could be more, but we'll charge you 900 an hour. Is that happening in that regard? Or is this really at this stage geared towards those $2,000, $8,000, $10,000 size deals? Or is this happening on a 6-figure, 7-figure level yet?
It can if lawyers apply their mind. Because if I tell you, look, if we're thinking of our houses, our homes, and we're going to build an extension at our home, are we going to get the building contractors and all the subcontractors, the plumbers, the electricians? Are we going to say to them, we'd like you to come and build this extension at our home, and we want a day work base. We'll pay you on a day work basis. And I've never met a lawyer yet who thinks that's a good idea. They always want to know, what's it going to cost me so I can budget for that? And our clients are exactly the same, where we could say to them, this is what it's going to cost, and here are some options for you. So you might want a £20,000 case here, but you might think, if this is, you know, betting the farm type litigation, you might say, though, but I am prepared to pay 80,000 for it, because I want that particular partner to deal with that case. And that you add your variables into what that is. And depending on your attitude to risk, because we shouldn't assume we know what clients value, we don't, but the clients do if we present them with options.
And just to give, that's helpful. And just because you're obviously much more involved than I and most people are, if 100% or 100 is full value-based pricing everywhere, it's being used in all big size firms, and 0 hasn't started, where are we today in the adoption in your mind? You know, ballpark.
10%.
Say again?
Very low. 10%. If that,
10%.
because most lawyers, when they think of value-based pricing, okay, do what I call hourly rates in drag, where they think that how long is it going to take me to do this piece of work? 3 hours. So therefore, I will create a fixed price of my hourly rate is £300. It's going to take me 3 hours. I will create a fixed price of £1,000. So therefore, now that's not a value-based price, because this 3-hour piece of work could be worth hundreds of thousands of pounds for the client. But all we've done is actually just work it out based on the time we think it's going to cost, as opposed to not necessarily the value.
That's so interesting. That really helped put things in perspective. So can you think of, maybe not, if you can on the spot, that's fine. What's an example of something where it's
Okay.
3 hours, but it's $100,000 of value for the client where they would pay more?
I'll give you an example. It's not necessarily hundreds of thousands, but it's a true story. Happened to me when I was still in practice, and I used to sit in an open plan office, and we're at 4:30 on a Friday afternoon, and a phone went, and opposite me, one of the paralegals took the call and said, "Yeah, I'm sorry, no, we won't be able to do anything today. We're just about packing up to go home." And I'm waving at this paralegal, said, put this through to me. I had a chat with this guy, and he ran a hairdresser shop. And he was very upset because in the town that he lived, somebody had posted something that was clearly very defamatory about him and his business on the town Facebook page. And he was saying, I need this to come down in the next half an hour. And I said, okay. I said, we can do something for you. I said, but can you just tell me who's posted this? I would have to do a conflict check. Lovely. There's no conflict check. And so I said, yeah, we can help do this for you. We can do this for you today. We'll do it for you now. It's going to cost you £600 plus VAT. But I'm going to do that. He said, fine, no problem. I said, well, I'm going to push you into to redirect you to our accounts people. They're going to take £600 plus VAT. By the time you come back, we will have the letter in front of us on screen. We'll talk you through it and we'll send it. Is that okay? Absolutely sure. So off he went, £600 or £800, paid the bill. Cashiers tell me, yep, we've got the cash. We had done one of these letters the week before for another client. So I've got the letter in front of me. I've got a trainee lawyer next to me. And we went through it and said, this is what we're going to say. Is that okay? He said, perfect. Can you please send that letter now? We did, and we sent it. And we sent it within 25 minutes of the initial call. Now, £600 for that piece of work for 20 minutes is about £1,800 an hour, if I broke it down into the hourly rate. Was that guy happy? He was over the moon that we sent that letter, and it was taken down that day. And in the end, when we went on to issue proceedings, the defendant caved in and he got all his money back. But he didn't know that then. He was prepared to pay what was an hourly rate equivalent of £1,800.
Yeah. No,
but him, the value was, do it now. I need it now because it's going to impact my business. And it's not until you start finding out what drives clients, what's important to them, that you can't, you start working out what value is, because we're all different.
That's helpful. And so like, yeah, and I know like there's two things. I want to talk about the transition to how you get there, but just out of curiosity, just so we can get a sense. The firm, when you left, I said you were about 60. How much of the firm was doing? What was the percentage of value-based pricing in the firm?
It was probably about that stage, about 20%. 20% of them, people were looking on, saying, I want to do some of that. And one of my litigation partners, actually, she was very much going to be a no penguin. Oh, no, that'll never work for me. I like my hourly rate. And since then, I've met with her. She's now at another firm, and she is a value-based pricing evangelist, because I was taking inquiries for her, pricing them and passing the work on with monies on account. And she was saying, Shaun, how do you get me £2,000 for doing a letter before action on a boundary dispute or something like that? How do you get that? And I just say, I point to the fact that you have written lots of articles on this subject, that you are an expert. And I tell them, if they want access to this expert, that's what it's going to cost them. And if we think about it, one of the golden rules of value-based pricing is nobody should price their own work in isolation, but get two pairs of eyes on every price. And that is why actors and sports people have agents, because they're better at negotiating the prices than their principals would be.
And so it's interesting because you have 20%, and that was the firm was what? How big was the firm?
To 240 people. It was only ever a pilot. The pilot was rolled out, and
Got it. And so
yeah.
is it still happening, or once you
It
left?
is. It is. It's some of the. I think some of the teams might have gone backwards a step or two, because it all depends. And this change management project doesn't happen unless the leaders are on board. So you've got to get people on board with this.
Yeah, and I think leaders will be on board if they're convinced that it will lead to more revenue, right? And so, and obviously, because work-life balance, there's a clear argument. It makes for a better work-life balance. It's hard to not see that, and so that's the real challenge, right? So it's and so the question becomes, it's either there's some movers who show 100% of their firm is value-based pricing, and they're large firms and they're growing and people are going towards them, or not. And is that what you think has to happen? Like, do you need a couple of firms that are taking off? Because if everyone's sort of doing it as pilot programs here or there, and they're like, let's take it, but you can never sort of fully do it. It seems like, as much as we're all saying AI is going to be the killer of billable hour, I don't know. Are you convinced?
I believe it will be the nail in the coffin, and the reason for that is because if your business model is linked to time, you've got to do something different. You're either going to go and find, if you're going to do it just at the cost that the AI takes to do things, you've got to go and find tens of thousands of more clients to actually prop up that revenue gap that you've got, or you're going to just talk about how can we do things differently. Our clients also will be expecting us to use AI and interact with them using AI. There will be pressures on us to make sure that we use the technology. And then we need to start thinking, okay, well, how can we present what we do as lawyers and capture some of the value that we create? Because we do create value.
Yeah.
We help people. And in the same way that if anybody wants to get a cheap will, their last will and testament, in the UK, you can buy one from a grocery store, a will kit.
All right, I'm with you on that, because if you're gonna, because Jack Newton, that's sort of where the buzz is right now, and when this comes on, he in the CleoCon conference recently said AI will be the nail in the coffin for the billable hour. He shared, based on his legal trends report, law is actually adopting faster in AI than in corporate, which is the first time you can hear that with law. So and I see in the legal tech space, everything's involved in AI. So if there's a point, and it should be almost now or in the near future, if the lawyer is like, oh yeah, we don't use AI, we do it internally ourselves, we do all of our discovery and our document review manually, the client's not going to believe them. And so if the client's not seeing a shift or a change in pricing, they're going to think, okay, now they're padding the bill. And so that's where I think is interesting. So maybe there's a hybrid. So tell us about, okay, I'm thinking about that attorney who's like, he's heard you or she's heard you and they're sold. And they want to, do a pilot program.
Yeah.
What's the next steps they can do in sort of getting that started?
So what we do, we create our pilot group. We bring in together all of the people in our pilot group and say, how do we price now? How do we do things? And the answers that you will receive from people within your organization is, we make it up as we go along. We do hourly rates in drag. We rely on the fact that this is what we've always done, or something like that. So we start looking at what we've done up until now. We then start working on, well, what questions can we be asking clients? Value-based pricing questions about what do they expect from us? What is the outcome they are looking like? What would it look like if we took money off the table? How do they want to work with us? Because our competitors aren't asking those questions. They're not having those goals. We then start presenting to our clients fixed price agreements, which talk about, these are the assumptions, these are the exclusions, this is the scope of the matter we're going to do. Here are the pictures of the teams that are going to be working on your matter. and we present them something that does not look like a 22-page engagement letter. And I won a piece of work where I was double the price of the nearest competitor because our fixed price agreement had pictures of the team in it, contact numbers, mobiles, emails, direct lines. And the chairman of the company said, Shaun, we went with your firm because it looked as though you'd really thought about this.
You look like a normal, yeah.
Expensive.
You look like a vendor pitching a product versus a law firm pitching an hourly rate. So 100%. So let me, this is a loaded question because this is what you do, but do I need a consultant to implement that? I'm a small firm. I have only a handful of people. What can I do if I mean, I guess I could read your book, right? And so I guess there's, because this is lawyers who learn. Lawyers have to learn. So in addition to your book, is there any resources, if a lawyer is not ready to hire a consultant, that you would direct them towards? I mean, that was helpful, that would be helpful for them.
Well, I have something called the Value-Based Pricing Colony, which anybody's free to join. And there's 280 proactive lawyers in that at the moment. And we have a continuing education program within that where, you know, taking litigation, for example, on the 7th of November, there's a guy who runs a litigation practice in Hong Kong, does not do the billable hour. He's going to talk about how he runs his practice. So I'm a great believer in not reinventing wheels and learning from each other, because, you know, that's the best way to learn. I'm in the process of developing a digital training course so that people can work through the 8 stages of the 8P-point plan, because they're not going to say, I've got a lot of time to sit down and read a book and work out how to do it myself. And then it's a question of, quite often I get brought into organizations where sometimes the manager might be saying, well, we are bought into this, but our lawyers need to hear it from someone else outside the business. Always. And you think, yeah, fine, I will come in and talk to you about what you've been talking to them about for the past 2 years. And if they hear it from someone wearing a yellow shirt, they think it's you.
I love that, because it's so same thing at Lawline. I'll say the same thing, and then I'll bring somebody and they'll say, everyone's like, oh my God, that's brilliant. But I get it, because I have a lot of awesome crazy ideas. So it's hard for them to know, is this one of David's crazy ideas, or is this a real one? One last question, and I can talk to you for hours, and I know we'll continue these conversations. Since you are like you said, you're building an online training course. You wrote a book. You speak a lot, and we have. So what our mission at Lawline is to help prepare attorneys for the future of law. And it's more important now than it's ever been. 1 year ago today, we saw what was happening with AI. We decided to put real focus on that. We created 75 hours of courses and 5 learning paths, just focus on how to implement AI, how to represent your clients. We also have several courses on the billable hour and the, you know, how that's going to change. What recommendation would you have for us, how we can support this, the value-based pricing in terms of education and courses? How it's something that I'm sort of bought into, building out and helping sort of build out content that can support attorneys in sort of at all stages. So I was just curious if you have any thoughts on how we can go approach that.
I think sometimes lawyers will say that my area of law is special. It cannot happen here. So I will talk to groups of residential property lawyers about how value-based pricing can work here. Then I will do wills and probate and private client laws, how value-based pricing. So you can break it down by specific teams, because they think, oh, okay, all right, now I understand. And then we can direct people. So for example, there's a law firm that I work with in Cape Town in South Africa, and there they've just relaunched on their website their options that they have for commercial property transactions. And sometimes it's nice to then point people to, well, go and have a look at that firm. Have a look at that firm there. Or there's a firm called Lynn & Brown in Perth, Western Australia. They haven't had timesheets for 6 years. Look at their website and the way they are doing things, because quite often lawyers' due diligence can be saying, who else has done it and can you show me? And so if you can say, look at that firm over there, that's what they're doing. and they're making money, and they're making more money than they were under the old model. Why don't you give it a go? And giving it a go and permitting people to try and be prepared for them to fail, but it can't be career limiting if we try something, is really, really important. And that's why we start small, we do pilot projects, we prove concepts, and lawyers being lawyers, once they see someone down the corridor making more money or leaving earlier or hitting their target, they're going to start thinking, what are they doing? How do I get some of that? And then you create a bit of momentum.
I love it. And by the way, we believe in pilot projects at Lawline as well. Right now we're doing a pilot project. We're doing a rotating 4-day work week. So half the company every other Friday has off. And so far, obviously the work-life balance is there. And the second thing is we're looking at productivity, efficiency, energy, other areas like that. So I think that's super important. So I appreciate that. And as I said in the beginning, is there any questions based on this conversation or based on anything else that you might have seen that you would have for me about what we do or Lawline or the billable hour? And if not, that's okay as well.
In terms of the billable hour and thinking about the American market, is there a reluctance amongst lawyers in America to embrace this? Do you find? And the reason I ask that is I did set up a virtual online conference to happen in America, and there 200 people initially interested. But when it came to commit, you've got to pay to attend this virtual, nobody did. And that was really, really interesting. And somebody has since said to me, no, Shaun, it's the American market isn't quite ready for this yet. So I don't know whether that's your experience.
And the answer is I don't know. I truly don't. I know because when you hang out in circles of legal tech, everyone's like, yes, let's give it a go. When you're at the Clio Con conference and Jack Newton says it, everyone's like, yes, let's give it a go. And then I saw there's a lot of people saying, is this really going to happen? And this is not the first time I've had this conversation. I had it many times, and it's the same sort of energy about it. But I would say my impression when you talk to large firms and large firms or mid to large firms, it's not really even it's not a real thing. That's my impression. I don't know for sure. And that's why I don't think it's a bad thing to start with the small to mid-sized firms, because that's an area where they do need to leverage their time. You can only work 40 hours, 80 hours, whatever it is. So that's where I see real opportunity. And so that's where I would focus the energy.
Yeah, Ron Baker, who is this pricing guru in California, and he's written 5-6 books on the subject. He says about lawyers, it's hard to tell a room full of multimillionaires their business model is wrong.
And that's essentially what they said, right? And when attorneys, these firms are getting $16 million bonus, partner, that's what partners get at these big firms, right? At the end of the year, 16 million. Who are you to say don't do that? That they're, you're doing it. So, but I think on every sign is pointing towards some form of that in different areas. And as you know, at least from numbers, solo practitioners, at least in America, are the largest group of attorneys. So solo and then small firms, and that's super exciting. And I think what can happen for them and what you're doing and what's happening in the space and especially with Clio is talking about it, I assume that means they're going to be. I don't think he would bring it up unless he had a plan over the next 12 to 18 months to implement some sort of software process to help them do the non-billable hour. Like, that's my guess. So I think things will shift just from that alone. When Clio is now a $3 billion valuation company. And to me, let's keep the conversation going. Shaun, I really appreciate this. I know we connected through LinkedIn and this happened really quickly. So we will continue this conversation and figure ways to keep changing the industry.
Thank you very much, David. I really enjoyed it.
Awesome.